The giant projection screen in our glass conference room displayed my salary in bold red numbers, $265,000. Patricia, our new CEO, pointed directly at me, while 14 executives sat frozen in their leather chairs. This compensation package represents 55% above market benchmark, she announced coldly. Completely unsustainable. My stomach dropped as every pair of eyes turned toward me. 6 years of building this company's most profitable client portfolio meant nothing in that moment. The woman who had been hired just 3 weeks ago was publicly humiliating me in front of my colleagues, treating my hard-earned success like a corporate disease that needed immediate surgery. I had started at Meridian Marketing Solutions, fresh out of graduate school, armed with nothing but ambition and a master's degree in strategic communications. Those early days felt like a lifetime ago, as I sat in that suffocating conference room, watching my professional reputation get dissected by someone who barely knew my name. The company had been my second home for 6 years. I had built relationships with clients from the ground up, working 18-hour days to secure contracts that most agencies could only dream about. My specialty was high-stakes corporate rebranding campaigns for Fortune 500 companies, and I had become known throughout the industry for turning around struggling brand identities. Just 3 weeks earlier, I had sealed the deal on a $12 million contract with Aerospace Dynamics, one of the largest manufacturers in the country. Their CEO had personally requested me after seeing my work with a pharmaceutical giant the year before. That contract alone would fund 6 junior positions and boost our quarterly projections by 30%. The old Meridian had felt like family. Robert Henderson, our previous CEO, had retired after 25 years of building a culture where creativity flourished and employees felt valued. He had personally promoted me to Senior Strategic Director 2 years ago, recognizing not just my revenue generation, but my mentorship of younger staff members. Weekly team lunches, collaborative brainstorming sessions, and genuine respect for work-life balance had made Meridian the kind of place where talented people stayed for their entire careers. Then came Patricia Blackwood. The board had hired her from Sterling Consulting Group, a Wall Street firm known for aggressive cost-cutting and corporate restructuring. At 42, Patricia had earned her Harvard MBA and built a reputation for increasing profit margins by eliminating what she called inefficiencies. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her gray suits looked expensive enough to feed a small family for months. From her first day, Patricia had made it clear that Meridian's family atmosphere was exactly what needed to change. She scheduled mandatory efficiency meetings, implemented time-tracking software, and began scrutinizing every expense over $50. The collaborative spirit that had made us successful started evaporating like steam from morning coffee. Now I understood her true intentions. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia continued, advancing to the next slide in her presentation. We're implementing an immediate compensation restructuring initiative. Some salaries have grown beyond reasonable market standards. David Chen, our CFO and one of my closest allies at the company, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His dark eyes met mine briefly, before he looked away clearly, as blindsided as everyone else. Sarah Martinez, the creative director, who had become my closest friend at work, sat completely still, her usually animated face drained of color. Tom Bradley, an ambitious account manager, who had joined the company 2 years after me, seemed to be the only person in the room who wasn't horrified. He leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes bright with what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. Tom had always resented my direct reporting relationship to the board and my higher compensation package, despite the fact that my clients generated 4 times the revenue of his accounts. The consulting analysis we commissioned shows clear disparities, Patricia continued, clicking to reveal a chart comparing salaries across the marketing industry. We're operating with unsustainable overhead that prevents us from remaining competitive. My name appeared highlighted at the top of the compensation list with a bright red arrow pointing to the overpaid designation beside my salary. The presentation felt deliberately designed to humiliate me, not inform the team about market conditions. Jeanette, Patricia said, turning her ice blue eyes directly toward me. Your current compensation package represents a luxury we can no longer afford. Effective immediately, we'll need to reduce your salary by 30% to align with industry standards. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah's hand moved slightly toward me across the polished conference table, then stopped as if she remembered where she was. David stared down at his notepad, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Furthermore, Patricia continued, your role will be modified to better reflect market-appropriate responsibilities. You'll report directly to Tom rather than maintaining board-leveled access, and client contact will be limited to supervised interactions only. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice remained steady. I wasn't aware my performance had become unsatisfactory. This isn't about performance, Patricia replied with a thin smile. It's about resource allocation and sustainable business practices. We've prepared your revised employment agreement for immediate signature. She slid a manila folder across the table toward me. The legal documents inside had clearly been prepared well in advance of this meeting, suggesting that my public humiliation had been planned as a dramatic unveiling rather than a collaborative discussion. Tom Bradley spoke for the first time, his voice carrying barely concealed excitement. I'm happy to take on expanded oversight responsibilities. The client relationships will benefit from more structured management. The man had just volunteered to manage accounts. He had never touched clients who trusted me personally and had specifically requested to work with me throughout their contracts. His presumption was breathtaking, but not nearly as shocking as the fact that Patricia seemed to think this transition would be seamless. I opened the folder and scanned the first page of the agreement. Beyond the salary reduction, the new terms included restricted access to client files, mandatory approval for all communications, and a reporting structure that would essentially demote me to junior associate level, despite my track record and industry recognition. I'll need time to review these terms with my attorney, I said, closing the folder. Actually, Patricia replied, we need your signature today to implement the changes by Monday. The board has already approved this restructuring, and delay isn't an option. She had cornered me completely, using public pressure and artificial urgency to force compliance. But as I looked around the table at my colleagues' shocked faces, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about market rates or sustainable business practices. This was about establishing dominance and destroying anyone who might challenge her authority. I stood slowly, maintaining eye contact with Patricia, while the room held its collective breath. My voice was calm, professional, and utterly final. I won't accept a 30% pay reduction based on flawed market analysis, and I certainly won't accept public humiliation as a management technique. Consider this my formal resignation, effective immediately. The manila folder remained untouched on the conference table as I walked toward the door. Behind me, Patricia's confident expression was already shifting into something that looked uncomfortably like panic, but I didn't turn back to see her face. I had more important things to do than watch her realize what she had just lost. The elevator ride to my office felt like descending through layers of my past life. 6 years of memories flashed through my mind. Late nights perfecting campaign strategies, celebration dinners after landing major accounts, mentoring sessions with junior staff members who had become like younger siblings. Everything Patricia had just destroyed in 15 minutes of corporate theater. I packed my personal items methodically, ignoring the curious glances from colleagues who had started hearing whispers about the meeting upstairs. My diplomas came off the wall first, followed by client appreciation letters and industry awards. The small, succulent plant Sarah had given me for my birthday went into the box along with my coffee mug collection and family photos. David appeared in my doorway, looking like he had witnessed a car accident. Jeanette, what just happened up there? Patricia can't actually expect you to accept those terms. She can expect whatever she wants, I replied, continuing to pack. I'm not participating in this circus. But your client's, the Aerospace Dynamics contract, she doesn't understand what you've built here. I paused, holding a framed photo of our team celebrating last year's record-breaking quarter. She's about to learn very quickly. My resignation letter was brief and professional. I thanked the board for 6 years of opportunities, expressed appreciation for my colleagues, and confirmed my immediate departure, with 2 weeks of vacation time covering the notice period. I delivered copies to Human Resources David and Patricia's assistant, maintaining the same calm demeanor I had displayed in the conference room. The parking garage elevator carried me down to my car for what I knew would be the last time. My hands didn't shake as I started the engine, and I didn't look back at the building where I had invested so much of my life. Some chapters close with dramatic finales, but the most important endings happen quietly when you simply decide you deserve better. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone was already ringing. "Jeanette, this is Patricia. We need to talk immediately." Her voice had lost its earlier confidence, replaced by something that sounded suspiciously like desperation. In the background, I could hear multiple conversations and what sounded like phones ringing constantly. "I've said everything I need to say," I replied. "My resignation is final." "You're being unreasonable. We can negotiate the terms." 2 hours ago, negotiation wasn't an option. "You needed my signature immediately, remember?" Patricia's breathing was audible across the connection. "Look, perhaps I was too aggressive in my approach. We can discuss a smaller reduction, maybe 15% instead of 30. I'm not interested in any reduction. My value hasn't changed since this morning." "Your value?" "Jeanette, you need to understand the bigger picture here. The board is demanding cost cuts across the entire organization." I almost laughed at her attempt to reframe the situation. "The board will have plenty of opportunities for cost reduction once they see next quarter's revenue projections." The call ended with Patricia still talking, her voice rising in pitch as she realized I wasn't going to be manipulated into returning. I turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of wine, settling onto my couch to consider my next moves. The wine had barely touched my lips when my landline rang. Sarah's number appeared on the caller ID. "Please tell me you're not really leaving," she said without preamble. "The entire office has gone insane since you walked out. Patricia's been in emergency meetings for the past 3 hours." "What kind of emergency meetings?" "David's been trying to explain your client relationships to her. Apparently, she had no idea that most of your accounts have personal loyalty clauses tied to your employment." I smiled for the first time since the morning. Those loyalty clauses had been my idea 3 years ago, negotiated into contracts after a competitor had tried to poach one of our major accounts by hiring away their primary contact. Robert had supported the unusual provision, understanding that client relationships in our industry were deeply personal. "How many clients has she contacted?" I asked. "That's the problem. Tom tried calling Aerospace Dynamics to reassure them about the transition, but their CEO was not pleased to hear you had left. He's demanding to speak with Patricia directly." The Aerospace Dynamics CEO, Harrison Wright, was a no-nonsense former military officer who valued loyalty and competence above everything else. He had chosen Meridian specifically because of my track record and had made it clear that his $12 million investment was contingent on my personal involvement in the campaign. "How did Patricia react to that?" "She's been trying to reach Wright for 2 hours, but his assistant keeps saying he's unavailable. David thinks Wright is deliberately avoiding her calls while he considers his options." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Jeanette, there's something else. I've been getting calls from other agencies all afternoon. And word is spreading through the industry that you're available, and 3 firms have already asked me to connect them with you." The marketing industry in our city was surprisingly small, and news traveled faster than gossip at a high school reunion. My sudden departure from Meridian would be interpreted as either a massive opportunity for competitors or a red flag about the company's stability. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. "I'm going to let Patricia learn about client loyalty the hard way." We talked for another 20 minutes with Sarah providing updates on the chaos erupting throughout the office. Tom had discovered that he didn't have access to most client files since they were secured under my login credentials. Patricia had demanded the IT department break those security protocols, only to learn that doing so would violate several confidentiality agreements. After Sarah hung up, I opened my laptop and began reviewing my employment contract and the non-compete clauses I had signed years earlier. Robert had been surprisingly generous with those terms, limiting restrictions to direct solicitation of existing clients rather than broader industry limitations. Patricia's aggressive behavior might have freed me from even those minimal constraints. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Jeanette, this is Harrison Wright. I heard about your departure from Meridian. We should talk tomorrow morning." 9 a.m. at the Riverside Cafe downtown. This conversation never happened. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back, I'll be there. The next morning arrived with unusual clarity. I dressed in my best navy suit and arrived at Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early, securing a corner table with privacy for sensitive conversations. Harrison Wright appeared exactly at 9, his silver hair and military bearing making him easy to spot even in civilian clothes. Ms. Thompson, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I appreciate you meeting me on short notice. Thank you for reaching out, Mr. Wright. He ordered black coffee and got straight to business. Your former employer contacted me yesterday afternoon. The conversation was unsatisfactory. They seemed to believe that our $12 million contract was transferable to any random employee. I'm sorry you had that experience. Don't apologize. You're not responsible for their incompetence. Wright leaned forward slightly. However, I am responsible for protecting my company's investment. Our contract with Meridian has specific performance guarantees that I believe they can no longer meet. I remained silent, understanding that Wright was approaching something significant. Our legal team reviewed the agreement last night. There's a key personnel clause that specifically names you as the primary strategic consultant. Your departure constitutes a material change in service delivery. What does that mean for the contract? It means we're terminating effective immediately and demanding full refund of advance payments. Meridian will forfeit the entire $12 million deal. Wright's expression softened slightly. I also wanted you to know that Aerospace Dynamics will be issuing a request for proposals next week for the same scope of work. I hope you'll consider submitting a bid through whatever firm you choose to join. After Wright left, I sat in the cafe for another hour, processing the implications of what I had just learned. Aerospace Dynamics wasn't just terminating their contract. They were essentially offering to transfer the business directly to me at whatever company I chose to join. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Patricia and 3 from David. I deleted Patricia's voicemails without listening, but David's message was worth hearing. Jeanette, you need to call me back immediately. 16 clients terminated their contracts this morning, and Patricia is talking about legal action against you. This situation is escalating beyond anything we anticipated. I finished my coffee and walked out into the bright morning sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Patricia had wanted to teach me a lesson about market value and company loyalty. Instead, she was about to receive the most expensive education of her career. The next week unfolded like a slow-motion avalanche, each day bringing fresh confirmation that Patricia's calculation had been spectacularly wrong. I spent Monday morning in interviews with 4 different agencies, each offering increasingly attractive packages to secure my immediate availability. By Tuesday afternoon, the marketing industry newsletter had picked up the story of Meridian's mass client exodus. The headline read, Senior Executive Departure Triggers Contract Avalanche at Established Agency. The article was carefully written to avoid legal liability, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. I accepted an offer from Creative Dynamics, a boutique agency known for innovative campaigns and ethical treatment of employees. They offered me $300,000 annually plus equity participation, along with immediate partnership track and creative freedom I had never experienced at Meridian. Most importantly, their existing client relationships complemented rather than competed with my former accounts. My first day at Creative Dynamics was scheduled for Monday, but by Wednesday of my departure week, 17 former Meridian clients had already contacted me directly. They weren't soliciting my services yet, but they wanted to understand my future plans and express dissatisfaction with their current representation. Sarah provided daily updates on the chaos consuming Meridian's operations. Patricia had hired a crisis management consultant at enormous expense, but their advice seemed limited to damage control rather than actual solutions. Tom Bradley was drowning under responsibilities he had coveted, but never understood, making basic errors that veteran clients found insulting. She actually told Mrs. Henderson from the fashion account that brand recognition wasn't important for luxury goods, Sarah reported during one of our coffee meetings. Mrs. Henderson has been in fashion marketing for 30 years. She terminated the contract immediately. The pharmaceutical giant that had been planning a major campaign launch pulled their business after Tom suggested they target younger demographics for arthritis medication. The tech startup that had trusted me with their initial brand development demanded immediate refunds when Patricia couldn't explain their customer acquisition strategy. By Friday, Meridian had lost 92 accounts, representing 41% of their annual revenue. The local business journal ran a front page feature analyzing the client exodus, interviewing industry experts about the importance of personal relationships in consulting services. When you hire an agency, you're really hiring specific people, explained Dr. Margaret Foster, who taught marketing strategy at the State University. Clients invest in trust relationships that can take years to build. You can't transfer that trust by changing someone's business card. Patricia attempted damage control by granting interviews to trade publications, claiming that the departures represented natural market fluctuations and temporary adjustment period challenges. Her explanations were so disconnected from reality that several industry leaders publicly contradicted her statements. Meanwhile, Creative Dynamics was experiencing unprecedented growth. Their phone hadn't stopped ringing since news of my hiring spread through professional networks. Aerospace Dynamics formally transferred their $12 million contract within days, and 6 other major accounts followed suit. My new colleagues welcomed me with genuine enthusiasm rather than the territorial anxiety I had expected. Jessica Walsh, the agency's founder, had built Creative Dynamics specifically to attract professionals who valued collaborative culture over corporate politics. "We've been hoping someone of your caliber would become available," Jessica told me during my second week orientation. "Your reputation for ethical practices and client advocacy fits perfectly with our mission." The partnership opportunity was real, not just a recruitment promise. Creative Dynamics operated as a collaborative, where senior consultants shared both decision-making authority and profit participation. My equity stake would vest over 3 years, but I would have voting rights and strategic input from day one. But the most satisfying aspect of my transition was the phone call I received on Thursday afternoon. "Jeanette, this is Robert Henderson." Hearing my former CEO's voice brought an unexpected surge of emotion. Robert had been more than a boss. He had been a mentor who had believed in my potential when I was still learning the industry. "Robert, how are you enjoying retirement?" "I'm enjoying it less each day as I watch what's happening to the company I spent 25 years building." His voice carried a mixture of sadness and anger. "I heard about Patricia's behavior in that meeting. I'm sorry you had to experience that." "Thank you. It was certainly enlightening. I also heard about your new position and the accounts you've taken with you. Frankly, I'm proud of you for standing up to that treatment." Robert paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. "Jeanette, I want you to know that 3 board members have approached me privately about the situation. They're questioning Patricia's judgment and wondering if there might be a path back for you under different leadership." "What kind of path?" "They're considering removing Patricia and offering you the CEO position." I nearly dropped my phone. The board members, who had approved Patricia's hiring, were now acknowledging their mistake and essentially asking me to clean up the damage. "Robert, I appreciate their confidence, but I'm very happy at Creative Dynamics. Patricia burned that bridge pretty thoroughly. I understand, and honestly, I think you're better off where you are. Meridian has cultural damage that will take years to repair. I just wanted you to know that people recognize what really happened." After Robert hung up, I sat in my new office looking out at the city skyline, reflecting on how completely my life had changed in 2 weeks. Patricia had intended to diminish my value and establish her authority. Instead, she had freed me to discover opportunities I never would have pursued while comfortable in my old position. That evening, Sarah called with the latest Meridian update. "Patricia actually blamed you in today's staff meeting. She said you had been deliberately undermining company stability and that your resignation was part of some elaborate sabotage plan." "How did people react to that?" David stood up and walked out. I've never seen him that angry. Half the creative team followed him, and now there's talk of a mass resignation. Sarah's voice carried a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Jeanette, I've been thinking about Creative Dynamics too. Do you think Jessica would be interested in a creative director with fashion industry connections?" I smiled, understanding that Patricia's destructive leadership was about to cost Meridian even more talent. I think Jessica would be very interested. Why don't you send me your portfolio? The avalanche Patricia had triggered was still gathering momentum, but it was no longer my problem to solve. I had better things to do than watch Meridian collapse under the weight of her mismanagement. Creative Dynamics was offering me opportunities to build something new, something better, something that honored both professional excellence and human dignity. 2 weeks into my tenure at Creative Dynamics, the marketing industry was buzzing with speculation about Meridian's future viability. The company that had once been considered a regional powerhouse was hemorrhaging talent clients and credibility at a rate that defied business school case studies. Patricia's desperation had become increasingly visible to industry observers. She had attempted to hire 3 different crisis management firms, each demanding higher retainer fees, as Meridian's reputation continued deteriorating. Her interviews with the trade publications were becoming more erratic, alternating between blaming market conditions and attacking former employees for disloyalty. Creative Dynamics, meanwhile, was experiencing organic growth that Jessica described as unprecedented in 15 years of business. Our client roster had expanded by 68%, and we had been forced to lease additional office space to accommodate new hires. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Patricia's attempt to reduce costs had ultimately created enormous value for her competitors. I was settling into my office on a Tuesday morning when Jessica knocked on my door with an unusual expression on her face. "Jeanette, I just received the strangest phone call. 3 board members from Meridian want to meet with us this afternoon. They're proposing some kind of consulting arrangement." The meeting took place at the downtown Marriott neutral territory that suggested serious business discussions. The 3 board members, Robert Thompson, Angela Martinez, and Charles Foster, arrived looking like executives attending a funeral rather than a business negotiation. Robert Thompson, who served as board chairman, spoke first. "Ms. Thompson, we want to apologize for the situation that led to your departure from Meridian. Patricia's behavior in that meeting was unacceptable and inconsistent with our company values. We should have intervened sooner," added Angela Martinez. "The compensation analysis Patricia presented was flawed and the public humiliation was completely inappropriate." Charles Foster leaned forward, his expression grave. "We're facing a vote of no confidence regarding Patricia's leadership. The damage to client relationships and staff morale has been catastrophic." I remained professionally neutral, though internally I was fascinated by their obvious desperation. "I appreciate your candor, but I'm not sure how Creative Dynamics can assist with internal Meridian challenges." "Actually, we have a specific proposal," Robert Thompson continued. "We'd like to offer you a 6-month consulting contract to help stabilize our remaining client relationships. The terms would be $400,000 plus performance bonuses." Jessica and I exchanged glances. The consulting fee alone exceeded my former annual salary, and the performance bonuses could potentially double that amount. "What would be required for this arrangement?" I asked. "We need someone with credibility to reassure clients that Meridian is committed to professional excellence," Angela Martinez explained. "Your industry reputation could help us retain accounts while we address leadership issues." "And what about Patricia?" The 3 board members looked uncomfortable, clearly having anticipated this question. "Patricia would need to issue a public apology for her treatment of you and resign her position effective immediately," Charles Foster said. "Those would be non-negotiable conditions for any consulting arrangement." I considered their proposal carefully. The consulting fee was substantial, but more importantly, it would require Patricia to publicly acknowledge her mistakes and face consequences for her behavior. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. "I'll need to discuss this with Creative Dynamics leadership," I said. "If we move forward, the consulting arrangement would need to be structured to avoid conflicts with our existing client base." After the board members left, Jessica and I spent an hour analyzing the implications of their offer. Creative Dynamics could benefit from the consulting revenue, and helping to stabilize Meridian might actually strengthen our industry position, rather than creating competition. "What do you think Patricia will do when the board presents these conditions?" Jessica asked. "I think she'll fight it initially, but she doesn't have many options left. The company is bleeding money and she's facing potential legal liability for mismanagement." That prediction proved accurate within days. Sarah reported that Patricia had been called into an emergency board meeting on Thursday afternoon. The session lasted 4 hours with raised voices audible through the conference room walls. She came out looking like she'd been hit by a truck, Sarah told me. Her assistant started clearing out her office immediately, and there's an all-hands meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. The all-hands meeting was brief and uncomfortable, according to multiple sources. Patricia read a prepared statement acknowledging errors in judgment regarding personnel decisions and announcing her immediate resignation. She specifically apologized to me by name for unprofessional conduct that failed to reflect Meridian's values. The apology felt hollow and legally scripted, but it was public acknowledgement that her behavior had been wrong. More importantly, it cleared the path for the consulting arrangement that would allow me to help repair some of the damage she had caused. But the week's revelations were far from over. David Chen, who had been promoted to interim CEO, called me Friday morning with information that transformed my understanding of the entire situation. Jeanette, there's something you need to know about Patricia's compensation and the real reason behind her cost-cutting demands. Our audit discovered some irregularities that explain her obsession with salary reductions. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to reveal. Patricia was receiving $450,000 annually plus undisclosed bonuses while claiming budget constraints required cuts to other employees' salaries. She also charged personal expenses to corporate accounts, including a $50,000 art purchase and luxury travel that had nothing to do with business operations. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Patricia had publicly humiliated me for earning $265,000 while secretly paying herself 70% more and stealing company funds for personal luxuries. How long has this been going on? I asked. We're still investigating, but it appears to date back to her first month of employment. She established discretionary spending accounts that bypassed normal approval processes. Who else knows about this? The board is reviewing everything with our attorneys. There may be criminal charges depending on what the full audit reveals. After David's call, I sat in my office processing the complete picture of Patricia's character. Her attack on my compensation hadn't been about market analysis or business efficiency. It had been about creating distractions from her own financial misconduct while establishing dominance through public humiliation. The woman who had called me overpaid had been systematically stealing from the company while living a lifestyle funded by corporate theft. Her righteous indignation about salary benchmarks had been performance art designed to mask her own criminal behavior. That evening, Jessica and I finalized the consulting agreement with Meridian. Creative Dynamics would provide strategic guidance for 6 months, with my role focused on client relationship recovery and cultural rebuilding. The arrangement would be announced publicly, sending a clear message that Meridian was committed to restoring professional standards. But the most satisfying aspect of the week was the phone call I received Saturday morning from the marketing trade publication that had been following the story. Ms. Thompson, we're preparing a feature article about executive compensation transparency and workplace dignity. Would you be willing to be interviewed about your experience? What kind of article? We want to examine how public humiliation tactics in corporate settings can backfire spectacularly. Your situation has become a case study in what happens when leaders confuse intimidation with management. The interview was scheduled for the following week, but I already knew what message I wanted to convey. Patricia's behavior had been about power and control, not business efficiency. The real lesson was that treating employees with dignity and respect wasn't just ethically correct, it was economically smart. Companies that valued their people created loyalty and commitment that no amount of fear-based management could replicate. Patricia had learned that lesson the hard way, but hopefully other executives would learn from her mistakes without having to repeat them. The industry interview, published 3 weeks later with the headline, "When Executive Intimidation Backfires, a Case Study in Leadership Failure." The article featured quotes from multiple sources and painted Patricia's behavior as a textbook example of how not to manage talent. But the media attention was overshadowed by developments that none of us had anticipated. David called me on a Tuesday morning with news that transformed the entire situation from a business dispute into a potential federal case. Jeanette, the FBI contacted me yesterday afternoon. They're investigating Patricia for wire fraud and embezzlement. Apparently, Meridian isn't the first company where she's exhibited this pattern. What do you mean? Her previous employer, Sterling Consulting Group, filed a complaint 6 months ago, alleging similar financial misconduct. The federal investigation has been ongoing, and our situation provides additional evidence of a systematic scheme. The revelation recontextualized everything that had happened. Patricia's aggressive cost cutting hadn't been about business efficiency. It had been about creating financial chaos that would mask her personal theft. My public humiliation had been designed to establish her authority, while distracting from her criminal activity. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate is 2.8 million across both companies, but that number is growing as auditors dig deeper. She was sophisticated about hiding transactions, but she got sloppy toward the end. Creative Dynamics continued thriving, while Meridian slowly stabilized under David's leadership. The consulting arrangement was working exactly as planned, with several major clients agreeing to remain with Meridian under the new management structure. Sarah had joined Creative Dynamics as creative director, bringing 3 fashion industry accounts with her. Tom Bradley had been demoted to junior account coordinator after clients complained about his incompetence, and half the original Meridian creative team had requested interviews with Jessica. The industry recognition that followed exceeded anything I could have imagined. Harvard Business School invited me to speak at their Executive Leadership Symposium about ethical management practices. The National Marketing Association nominated me for their Professional Excellence Award, and 3 universities requested permission to develop case studies based on my experience. But the most rewarding aspect of the changes was the opportunity to mentor other professionals facing similar challenges. I started receiving emails from marketing executives around the country who had experienced workplace intimidation or salary discrimination. One message particularly touched me. Dear Ms. Thompson, I read about your experience in the trade journal and wanted to thank you for standing up to that treatment. I'm facing a similar situation with a new supervisor who is trying to cut my salary while increasing his own benefits. Your story gave me the courage to document everything and contact our HR department. I wanted you to know that your example is helping other people find their own courage. The mentorship opportunities led to a more formal initiative. Creative Dynamics established a scholarship program for women in business school, funded partly by our increased revenue and partly by my personal contributions. We also created an industry newsletter focusing on ethical leadership practices and professional development. Patricia's legal troubles continued escalating throughout the summer. Federal prosecutors filed formal charges including wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The case attracted national attention as an example of executive misconduct, with Patricia's treatment of me cited as evidence of her character and judgment. The trial was scheduled for fall, but Patricia's attorneys were already discussing plea bargain arrangements. The evidence against her was overwhelming, including digital records of fraudulent transactions and testimony from multiple victims across different companies. I was asked to provide a victim impact statement for the federal court, describing how Patricia's behavior had affected not just me personally, but the broader business community's trust in ethical leadership. Patricia Blackwood's actions represent more than individual misconduct, I wrote. Her behavior demonstrates a pattern of using power to intimidate employees while covering up financial crimes. The public humiliation she inflicted was designed to distract from her own criminal activity while establishing dominance through fear. The statement continued. However, her actions also revealed the strength of professional communities that value integrity over intimidation. The industry response to her behavior shows that ethical leadership ultimately prevails over short-term manipulation. By early fall, Creative Dynamics had become one of the fastest-growing marketing agencies in the region. Our client base had expanded to 150 accounts, generating $62 million in annual revenue. Jessica offered me full partnership with equal ownership stakes, recognizing both my business contribution and the industry credibility I had brought to the firm. The partnership ceremony was held at the city's best restaurant with colleagues, clients, and industry leaders, celebrating not just my success, but the triumph of principles over politics. Robert Henderson attended, expressing pride in my resilience and professional growth. You turned Patricia's worst behavior into your greatest opportunity, Robert told me during the reception. That takes character that can't be taught in business school. Harrison Wright from Aerospace Dynamics spoke during the dinner addressing the assembled group about the importance of personal integrity in business relationships. When executives try to intimidate talented people, they reveal their own insecurity and incompetence, Wright said. Jeanette's response to that treatment showed the difference between leadership based on fear and leadership based on respect. But the evening's most meaningful moment came when Sarah raised her glass for a toast. To Jeanette, who showed all of us that standing up for dignity and self-worth isn't just personally important, it's professionally powerful. Your courage created opportunities for everyone in this room, and your example continues inspiring people throughout the industry. The applause was warm and genuine, reflecting not just professional success, but personal relationships built on mutual respect and shared values. Patricia had intended to diminish my influence and establish her own authority. Instead, she had created a platform for demonstrating that ethical leadership and business success were not just compatible, but inseparable. As I looked around the room at colleagues who had become friends and clients who had become advocates, I realized that Patricia's worst behavior had revealed the best aspects of our professional community. Sometimes the people who try to tear you down end up building you up in ways they never could have imagined. 6 months after Patricia's initial attack, the federal courthouse downtown became the stage for the final act of her professional destruction. I sat in the gallery, wearing my navy blue suit, the same outfit I had worn to my first Creative Dynamics interview, watching as federal prosecutors presented evidence of systematic financial fraud spanning multiple companies and several years. Patricia looked smaller than I remembered, her expensive suits replaced by conservative courtroom attire that couldn't disguise the weight loss and stress lines that had appeared since her arrest. Her legal team had clearly advised her to project remorse and cooperation, but her expression remained defiant whenever she thought nobody was watching. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital forensics had traced hundreds of fraudulent transactions, from the $50,000 art purchases charged to Meridian's corporate account to luxury hotel bills from personal vacations attributed to business development expenses. Her pattern of financial misconduct extended back 7 years across 3 different companies, but the prosecutor had built their case around more than just financial crimes. They had established a pattern of behavior that showed Patricia using workplace intimidation to create chaos that masked her theft. My public humiliation had been part of a deliberate strategy to destabilize company operations while she pillaged corporate accounts. The defendant's treatment of employees was designed to create fear and confusion that would prevent close examination of financial irregularities, explained Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh during opening statements. Public humiliation and artificial crises were tools she used to maintain control while systematically stealing from her employers. 3 former employees from Patricia's previous companies testified about similar experiences with salary manipulation, public criticism, and impossible performance, demands that coincided with periods of increased financial theft. The pattern was so consistent that it revealed calculated strategy rather than poor judgment. When my turn came to testify, I described the meeting where Patricia had displayed my salary and demanded immediate acceptance of new terms. The prosecutor asked me to explain how her behavior had affected not just me personally, but the broader business environment. Her actions created a culture of fear that prevented employees from questioning financial decisions or reporting suspicious activities, I explained. When executives use public intimidation, they're not just attacking individual employees. They're undermining the trust and transparency that ethical businesses require. Patricia's defense attorney attempted to portray her as a victim of corporate pressure who had made mistakes under stress. But the evidence of premeditation was too extensive, and her lack of genuine remorse undermined claims of temporary poor judgment. The trial lasted 2 weeks with testimony from forensic accountants, former colleagues, and FBI investigators who had traced Patricia's financial crimes across state lines. Each day revealed new details about her elaborate schemes and the sophisticated methods she had used to hide stolen funds. During the sentencing phase, I was invited to provide a victim impact statement. I had spent weeks preparing my remarks, wanting to address not just Patricia's impact on me personally, but the broader implications of her behavior for professional communities. Patricia Blackwood's crimes extended beyond financial theft, I told the judge. Her use of workplace intimidation to mask criminal activity created lasting damage to professional trust and ethical standards. However, the industry response to her behavior also demonstrated the strength of communities that value integrity over intimidation. I continued. Her attempts to diminish my professional worth and establish dominance through humiliation ultimately revealed the importance of standing up for dignity and self-respect. Sometimes the people who try to tear us down end up building platforms for demonstrating values that strengthen entire industries. The judge sentenced Patricia to 36 months in federal prison, plus restitution of $2.8 million. Her professional licenses were permanently revoked, and she was banned from serving in executive positions at publicly traded companies. But the most satisfying moment came after the sentencing when Patricia's attorney approached me in the courthouse hallway. "My client would like to apologize to you personally for her behavior in that meeting," he said. "She understands now that her treatment of you was inappropriate and counterproductive." I considered the offer for a moment, then declined politely. "I appreciate the gesture, but Patricia's apology isn't necessary. Her behavior taught me valuable lessons about my own strength and principles. In a strange way, I should probably thank her." The attorney looked confused, clearly not understanding how humiliation could lead to gratitude. "She tried to diminish my worth and discovered she had actually underestimated it," I explained. "That's not something that requires forgiveness. It's something that deserves recognition." Outside the courthouse, Jessica was waiting with Sarah and David, who had driven down to witness the conclusion of Patricia's legal troubles. We walked to a nearby restaurant for lunch, discussing not Patricia's downfall, but creative dynamics' continued growth and the positive changes happening throughout the industry. "You realize this case is going to be studied in business schools for years," David said. "Harvard already contacted me about developing a case study on ethical leadership and crisis management." The academic attention was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came from concrete changes happening in professional environments. Several companies had implemented new policies requiring transparency in executive compensation and prohibiting public employee criticism in group settings. The Marketing Professional Association had adopted the Thompson Standards for ethical leadership, requiring member agencies to establish clear protocols for employee dignity and compensation transparency. The standards were being used as model policies by professional organizations in other industries. Most importantly, I was receiving regular emails from marketing professionals who had found the courage to address their own workplace challenges after reading about my experience. The story had become a symbol for standing up to intimidation and demanding professional respect. That evening, back in my office at Creative Dynamics, I reflected on the complete transformation of my professional life. The partnership agreement Jessica and I had signed made me a full equity owner in a company that was projected to reach $75 million in revenue within 2 years. Our client portfolio included 12 Fortune 500 accounts, and we had hired 23 new employees in the past 6 months. The scholarship program had provided funding for 8 women to attend graduate business school, and our industry newsletter had become required reading for marketing executives throughout the region. But the most meaningful change was personal. I had discovered strength and confidence that Patricia's attack had revealed rather than diminished. Her attempt to humiliate me had become a catalyst for professional growth that exceeded anything I could have achieved while comfortable in my old position. Sometimes the worst things people do to us become the foundation for our greatest successes. Patricia had intended to destroy my career and establish her own dominance. Instead, she had created opportunities for me to demonstrate values and achieve recognition that transformed my entire industry. As I locked my office and prepared to leave for the evening, I realized that I no longer thought about Patricia with anger or resentment. Her behavior had been wrong and her crimes deserved punishment, but her impact on my life had ultimately been positive. She had tried to teach me a lesson about corporate hierarchy and personal worth. Instead, she had learned that intimidation is no match for integrity, and that attempts to diminish others often reveal the limitations of those who make them. The real lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about recognizing that our response to adversity defines us more than the adversity itself. Patricia's worst behavior had brought out the best in me, and that was a victory worth celebrating. 1 year after Patricia displayed my salary on that conference room screen, I stood before 300 graduating business students at the state university, delivering the commencement address about ethical leadership and professional courage. The irony wasn't lost on me that Patricia's attempt to diminish my worth had led to recognition as a thought leader on the very principles she had violated. Creative Dynamics had just been named Regional Agency of the Year, with revenue projections reaching 87 million annually. Our partnership model had become a template for other firms seeking to attract top talent through collaborative ownership rather than traditional hierarchical structures. The company that Patricia had inadvertently helped me build was now larger and more successful than Meridian had ever been. The scholarship program had expanded to support 15 women annually, and we had established an internship pipeline with 3 major universities. Sarah had been promoted to creative partner, and our team had grown to include former colleagues from 5 different agencies who were drawn by our reputation for ethical treatment and professional growth. But the changes extended far beyond business metrics. The federal conviction had made Patricia's case a cautionary tale, studied in business schools nationwide. Her systematic use of workplace intimidation to mask financial crimes had become a textbook example of how poor leadership destroys value, while ethical management creates sustainable success. Harvard Business School had developed a case study that was being used in MBA programs across the country. The case examined how workplace dignity and compensation transparency contributed to long-term profitability, using creative dynamics growth as evidence that ethical practices were economically smart. More importantly, the industry had implemented concrete changes that would protect future employees from similar treatment. Professional associations had adopted ethics standards that specifically prohibited public employee criticism and required transparency in compensation decisions. The mentorship network that had grown from my experience now included hundreds of marketing professionals who supported each other through workplace challenges. We met quarterly for professional development sessions, and our online community provided resources for anyone facing discrimination or intimidation. Standing at the podium, looking out at graduates who would soon enter the professional world, I reflected on the lessons that Patricia's behavior had taught me about strength, dignity, and the power of principled responses to adversity. Your careers will include moments when people try to diminish your worth or intimidate you into accepting less than you deserve, I told the graduates. These moments are not obstacles to overcome. They are opportunities to demonstrate your values and discover your strength. I shared the story of that conference room meeting, the public humiliation, and the decision to walk away rather than accept disrespectful treatment. But I focused on what came after the industry support, the new opportunities and the platform that adversity had created for positive change. The person who tried to teach me about my limitations ended up revealing my potential. Her attempt to humiliate me became the foundation for achievements that exceeded my previous ambitions. Sometimes our greatest opponents become our most effective teachers, not because they're wise, but because they force us to discover wisdom within ourselves. The graduates' attention was complete, and I could see recognition in their faces as they processed the implications of choosing dignity over security. Success built on intimidation and fear is temporary and fragile. Success built on respect and integrity creates foundations that last for entire careers. The choice between these approaches will define not just your professional trajectory, but your personal character. After the ceremony, dozens of students approached with questions about navigating workplace challenges and building ethical careers. Their enthusiasm reminded me that each generation had opportunities to improve professional standards and create more supportive environments. That evening, Jessica, Sarah, and I celebrated at the rooftop restaurant where we had held our partnership ceremony. The city lights sparkled below us as we toasted another successful year and planned for continued growth. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Patricia had treated you differently that day? Sarah asked. I considered the question seriously. I probably would have stayed at Meridian, accepted gradual salary increases, and never discovered what I was capable of achieving on my own. In a strange way, her worst behavior created my best opportunities. Jessica raised her glass for a toast. To Patricia Blackwood, who accidentally taught us the most valuable lesson about professional success. When you know your worth and refuse to compromise your dignity, the universe has a way of validating your courage. We laughed at the irony, but the truth behind the toast was profound. Patricia's attack had forced me to articulate and defend my professional value in ways that revealed strength I didn't know I possessed. Her attempt to diminish me had become a catalyst for growth that transformed not just my career, but my entire understanding of what was possible. The scholarship recipients joined us for dessert, sharing stories about their academic progress and career aspirations. Listening to their dreams reminded me that Patricia's negative impact had been transformed into positive opportunities for women who would benefit from the programs her behavior had inspired. As the evening wound down, I walked to my car thinking about the complete transformation of my professional life. The humiliation that had felt so devastating 12 months earlier had become the foundation for achievements that seemed impossible when I was comfortable in my old position. Patricia was serving her federal sentence, while I was building a legacy of ethical leadership and professional excellence. She had lost her career, her freedom, and her reputation, while I had gained partnership recognition and the respect of colleagues throughout the industry. But the most important lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about recognizing that our response to adversity reveals and develops character in ways that comfort never can. Patricia's worst behavior had brought out qualities in me that might have remained dormant if she had treated me with basic respect. True professional value cannot be diminished by others' insecurity or manipulation. When you know your worth and stand by your principles, temporary setbacks become foundations for lasting success. The people who try to tear you down often end up building platforms that elevate you beyond their reach. Sometimes walking away from toxic situations opens doors to extraordinary opportunities that would never have appeared if you had accepted disrespectful treatment. The courage to demand dignity creates ripple effects that benefit entire industries and future generations of professionals. Patricia had tried to teach me about limitations. Instead, she had revealed possibilities that transformed not just my career, but my entire understanding of what ethical leadership could achieve. Have you ever faced a moment when someone tried to diminish your professional worth or intimidate you into accepting less than you deserved? How did you respond, and what did that experience teach you about your own strength and values? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about professional courage and workplace dignity. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing that standing up for yourself can create opportunities that exceed your current limitations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is not determined by others' treatment of you. When you know your value and refuse to compromise your dignity, you create foundations for success that intimidation can never shake.